The 1970 Buicks were the last of their breed and one of the most handsome cars from GM of the 1965 to 70 generation. And while many of the vehicles in Buick's lineup for 1970 were great lookers, including the 1970 Riviera, particularly with the long-skirted rear fenders, the 1970 Electra Custom Limited was the top-of-the-line vehicle and highly luxurious for its time. With the base price starting at about $4,600 for an entry-level Electra and extending up to $4,700 or $4,800 for the custom and custom limited hardtop sedans as well as coupes, the Electra 225 was slotted well below even the base Cadillac Calais that carried a base price of $5,600 for the coupe and $5,800 for the sedan in 1970. Yet despite the top-of-the-line Buicks being cheaper than the bottom-line Cadillacs of the day, the Buicks arguably offered significantly more luxury and value at the price point. These Deuce and a Quarters, as they were so known because of their 225 inches in length, were indeed great land yachts of their time. And that land yacht nature was not only present in the overall length of the vehicle at 225 inches, as just mentioned, but also in the wheelbase at a hefty 127 inches, or 3 inches greater than the lower-level LeSabre and Wildcats. The wheelbase was also significantly greater than, for instance, the Caprice at 119.5 inches. However, despite the sheer size of these vehicles, the interior passenger compartments, while somewhat roomy, are not overly roomy, especially in the back seat area, in part due to the significantly lengthy bottom seat bolster, which makes it most comfortable in the back seat actually for individuals that are relatively tall, as shorter individuals will likely have a hard time with the bottom of the seat bolster hitting the back of their knee. But in general, the interior on these Electras, especially the Customs and the Custom Limiteds, is a very rich, opulent place to be. More specifically, the Custom Limited interiors could be had in all vinyl trim or, my favorite, Keswick cloth, as shown here, which was a very, very rich, thick, durable brocade that continued on the Buicks into the mid-70s. One down from the Custom Limited was just the Electra Custom, which could be had with Keynote cloth, another similarly rich brocade, but in a different pattern and not quite as thick as the Keswick cloth, albeit very elegant. And again, the Electra Custom could be had in Keynote cloth or all vinyl. And finally, the base Electra came with cashmere cloth or all vinyl trim. For whatever reason, Buick chose to name all of their cloth seating fabrics in 1970 with words starting with a K, but that's what they did. And each of the interiors was quite remarkable, albeit I will say the Electra Custom and the Electra Custom Limited interiors, to me, are by far my favorite. The interior dashboards on the Electra featured very driver-centric controls, with the climate control being at the driver's side left and only being able to be controlled by the driver, while the radio was on the right and could be controlled by either the driver or the passenger. The optional clock would be in the middle of the dashboard near the passenger, and a number of options could be had overall in the interior, including split bench seats, AM/FM 8-track radio. Interestingly, only 2 speaker systems were available, while other GM divisions were already employing 4-speaker setups. One could also order power windows, power seats, power locks, cruise control, the speed alert system that when you tripped a certain speed that was preset by the driver made a sound akin to a dying swan, and a whole host of other options, including even automatic climate control, which interestingly did not have markings for temperature, simply cool and warm. A trip odometer was also available, and the location to reset the trip odometer is one of the most interesting locations I've ever seen. It's actually near where a driver's right leg would rest at the very bottom of the dashboard. Why Buick put it there, I honestly don't know. This is also, to my knowledge, one of the first vehicles to have a map light integrated into the rearview mirror. Many vehicles by this point, especially the luxury cars, did have a map light somewhere on the interior, but few had one outside of General Motors vehicles integrated into the rearview mirror. Under hood, 1970 was most certainly a great year for Buick powertrains. And it's the only year of the premium fuel Buick 455 cubic inch V8, which was introduced for the 1970 model year and was an enlarged 430 cubic inch V8. That V8 was announced in 1967 model year across the Buick lineup. For those who are not aware, prior to the 1977 model year, each General Motors division used its own V8 engines, and they consequently have very different driving characteristics. It makes driving the different vehicles from the various GM divisions a unique experience, as opposed to something like today where every vehicle has a 2-liter turbocharged four-cylinder, whether it's a Cadillac or a Chevrolet. In any case, the 455 cubic inch mill that was under hood in the Electra was indeed a very special powertrain, as it made 370 gross horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque. This would be the highest horsepower ratings that the Buick V8s would see and the Electra would see, especially as the horsepower ratings would change from SAE gross to net in 1972, and compression ratios would be lowered in 1971 as GM transitioned its engines to be able to run on no-lead fuel. Behind the 455 cubic inch engine was GM's tried and true turbohydromatic 400 transmission, an absolutely bulletproof unit that was also a smooth shifter. It's hard to complain about anything with this engine and transmission combo, aside from the fact that it is so smooth and so silky that all you want to do is just drive faster, frankly. Out back, the Electra came standard with a 256 super lazy highway gear rear end. And I will say, having owned a 1970 Electra with this rear end, it is quite interesting in that, number one, these vehicles and my vehicle would routinely return 17 or 18 miles per gallon on the freeway, all because the engine is loafing along at relatively low RPMs if you keep the speeds to about 70 or 75 miles an hour. I will also say that because of this lazy rear end, first gear goes up to about 50 miles an hour, second gear goes up to the high 80s or almost 90 miles an hour, which is great because you have excellent passing power on the freeway. When you floor it, the transmission actually kicks down, and the Buick V8, different from some of the other 455s from the General Motors divisions or the Cadillac engines, is actually a pretty high rever and pulls strongly all the way up to its red line. It makes for a wonderful experience, and I would say especially in freeway settings. The lazy rear end doesn't give you all that great of a launch, but it definitely endows the vehicle with significant higher speed passing power. So what's it like to own the Electra, and how does it compare to some other 1965 to 70 generation GM vehicles? Well, having owned a number of these from Buick as well as other divisions, I will say a couple things. Number one, the Buick actually has a stiffer ride than a number of the other GM divisions, and it has a thicker gauge frame than the other GM divisions as well. This contributes to a really solid, almost like the car is carved out of a solid billet of steel, especially when you go over bumps. It traverses roads with surprising levels of solidity, and it certainly doesn't jiggle over bumps like that bowl of Jell-O that's in your fridge. The powertrain components are generally very robust, although I will say if you have to have a water pump replaced on the Buick V8, I would recommend an experienced mechanic, in part because the bolts are not that large, they tend to snap, and they go through an aluminum timing cover, and you really just don't want issues with trying to procure another one of those. They're becoming hard to find. Outside of that, I would also say I've seen some challenges with the oil pump gears on some vehicles, but by and large, the Buick V8 is very trouble-free, smooth, and powerful, interestingly, at the upper RPM ranges, as I previously mentioned, and more so than the other 455s from the GM divisions or even the Chevrolet 454. And if you're looking for one of these Electras, I will say that they also have what I think is one of the rarest pieces of automotive componentry in at least modern history. And what is that? Nothing else than the grille emblem on these vehicles. They have been hard to find for many, many years, and now when one comes up for sale, they almost always go for about $600 or so. And they're made out of plastic. They stick out on the front of the vehicle. As time goes on, they age and they become brittle. And then often, because that area of the nose of the grille sticks out so far, that's where people start brushing it against a concrete barrier or something, and they break it off. Almost every 1970 Electra that I have seen has either no grille emblem or it has an aftermarket piece in its place that looks very different from what was there originally. Overall, though, it's very hard to fault the 1970 Deuce and a Quarters. And in the history of Electras, I would actually say that the 1970 model year might be my favorite in terms of driving experience because of the 1 year only 455 premium fuel V8. I will say that I think I like the 68 and 69 just visually a little better than the 70, but the 70 is still very handsome. And if you find one for sale that's at a reasonable price and in good condition, I would certainly recommend snapping it up. You will not be sorry. Thanks again for watching this review of the 1970 Buick Electra, or the Deuce and a Quarter. Hope you enjoyed it, and take care. Thanks again for watching this review of the 1970 Electra 225. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like and comment, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve this video up to more people just like you. Check out the video thumbnails at the bottom left and right for a few suggestions as to what to watch. And if you haven't yet subscribed, click the circular icon of the 67 Buick Riviera at the top left, then hit the bell to ensure that you're notified of all my future postings. Until the next time, thanks again, and take care.